Hey, Kris, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, John?
I'm doing great. We are trying the remote show,
Yes, we are.
so this could get dicey.
Yes.
Just, warning everybody, if this is a short show, you know what happened.
Yeah. Blame it on the T-Mobile.
Blame it on the team. Kris is in South Central Texas. Is that?
No, I'm in Toccoa, Georgia.
Oh, you're in Georgia.
I'm in Georgia. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that's my bad.
Yeah.
I don't think I had put that together. I was like, that doesn't look like a room in the camp that I know. This is a very different thing that you're doing now as a camp.
Yeah.
Seems like.
I believe. Hey, that happened.
You couldn't see my face, could you?
I just saw you turn around and it was like stuck with you, like pointing your finger.
Okay. My son decided to come in while we were recording and leave the door open so I could hear everyone in the house talking to each other. So that's fun.
We'll cut it out in post.
Yeah. We're not, it's just life.
Yeah. Just leave it in.
So you're in Georgia.
I'm in Georgia.
All the way in Georgia.
Yes, we are 2 hours northeast of Atlanta.
Okay.
Earlier today, we were in Athens, Georgia, which is about an hour and 20 minutes away. That's where the regional office is out here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of funny that Athens, Georgia being close to the regional office and Athens, Texas being close to the regional office.
Yes.
Tyler is that's funny. Anyway. Yep. Maybe it's not funny. Maybe that's just funny to me.
Yeah, the office here is
probably about the same distance.
Pretty close, yeah. Yeah, the office here is almost a stone's throw away from the university.
Wow.
Yep. That's why they chose it.
I mean, yeah, they got to get their people somewhere.
Yep.
From somewhere. Hey, this is a funny question for today.
Yep.
What are you drinking?
Well, since this is the near beer or maybe the non-alcoholic edition, I am drinking my favorite coffee in the world, Dr. Pepper.
That is admirable right there.
Yep.
Favorite coffee, Dr. Pepper.
Yep.
I have switched. My favorite coffee now has coffee in it, but it's still mostly chocolate milk. So
yeah,
I don't feel bad about that.
Yep.
But I'm right there with you. It doesn't taste like Dr. Pepper. Why are we trying to drink something else here?
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up drinking Coke because my mom's dad in Nacogdoches, Texas, worked for the at least for a while worked for the Coke bottling plant in Nacogdoches.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad's dad's bakery was right next to the Dr. Pepper distribution office or whatever in Mount Pleasant. So they had Dr. Pepper and Mom had Coke. And when Mom and Dad got married, guess who won?
Coca-Cola.
So I grew up drinking Coke more than Dr. Pepper.
Yeah.
But have since evened it out pretty good. But
okay.
Today it's Coke.
Okay.
So
well, I do have this though for the show.
You can actually pop the top.
Oh, that was a good one.
Mine is already already iced.
Pre-opened. Yep.
There you go.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Oh yeah. It's the good stuff.
Dang, that's good.
Sugary.
Yep.
23 flavors. No blurb.
No blurb.
Nope.
If you don't know about it, I'm sorry.
Yep. I do have a bonus though.
What is that?
Swiss cake.
Is that a Little Debbie?
Swiss cake roll.
Oh, Swiss cake roll.
Yes.
That's right.
So
well done. Something you probably shouldn't eat if you're drinking a beer.
Well, yeah, yeah, because chocolate and beer sometimes
it's weird, man.
Mix.
No, but Dr. Pepper and chocolate is just fine.
Yes.
Diabetes, here we come.
Yes.
It is a little bit funny that you're in Georgia drinking Dr. Pepper and I'm in Texas drinking Coke, because
Yeah, Dr. Pepper is not as
Coke
popular
is
out here.
Coke is from Georgia and
Yep.
Dr. Pepper's from Texas. So.
Yes.
For those of you that care, and most of you don't, I guess. But hey, this is us talking more about the beverages.
It is.
So,
It is. We were expanding the beverage portion of the show.
Perfect.
Yep.
That's absolutely right. Did you want to go and do the boost, or did you want to wait for that?
We'll catch it at the end. That way we aren't.
Just make sure we got to make sure that we do it.
I have them pulled up. I have both.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll keep the same flow of the show.
Okay. Today you had an interesting idea. I thought we're going to talk about digital mixers.
Yes.
Was there something that like brought this up to you, or you just wanted to talk about?
Well, it was one of those kind of going, it's getting kind of close to the show. We haven't really locked down an idea. Mm-hmm. So what could we talk about? And it just came to mind. We haven't done an AV show in a while. So let's mix it up. And that is,
I like it.
That is an easy one to discuss. Thought maybe we could talk about some of the reasons why they went away from the analog boards, and talk about what some of the advantages are of a digital board.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I feel like I'm one of the lucky ones, and I feel like I can say that because I value the history of all of this so much that I actually didn't start mixing until early 2000s. I didn't start really in earnest learning too much about it until probably 2010.
Okay.
But growing up as a musician and then being in bands, and not just concert band, which is what I started in, but like actual, them newfangled musics, started being around sound systems and microphones and XLRs and quarter inches, and didn't know much about it, and rolled my fair share of badly rolled cables.
Mm-hmm.
But I really valued music, and I valued listening to music, and I valued other people being able to listen to music. And that's really where these PAs come in, right? Every sound amplification solution is just about being able to hear the like the music or the message or the whatever it is that's trying to be conveyed. And you want it to be as, the way that I was taught, you want it to be as true to the source as possible.
Yep.
That's changed a little bit over time. But the initial idea was to have the whatever instrument it is, whether it's your voice or, an actual, or not an actual, because your voice is an instrument, but whatever source you had that you needed to amplify, you wanted it to sound like that whenever it came across. And so there's a bunch of different ways to do that. And you start to, get these really ingenious people who can turn a sound wave, which is not just a pressure wave, even though that's how our ears receive it.
Yep.
It's also a kinetic movement of particles. Pretty crazy when you actually start studying this stuff. But you got these guys who could then figure out how to turn that into an electrical signal that could be passed through cables, and then could be run into an amplifier, and then could be then put out using transducers to a bigger audience than what you could hear initially, at least. And and all kinds of stuff. Like I have to start there in my mind because I have to remember that like a lot of the technologies that are new now, a lot of the stuff that we talk about, that we'll talk about, I think in this show. I mean, it seems like such a crazy jump when we went from analog to digital boards, but I mean, we can't forget that it was a big jump before. At the very beginning, it was a big jump that we had this, and we talk about the difference between analog and digital, and there's an element of like, yes, electricity passing through a cable. There's analog involved in that, but it's not quite as analog as your voice actually making a noise, like wind blowing across the reeds of our vocal cords, kind of crazy how all that works. And if you ever get a chance to look at that, like that's a different level of, nerdhood, I guess.
Yeah.
But all that to say, somewhere in the, I tried to look this up, and I don't feel like I got a good, even answer to this, but it was before. It had to be before 2004. I think like the first one had to come out.
You were looking for like the first digital board?
Yeah. Oh man, this is 1987. So I don't know. But that'd be a fascinating, some historian out there. I'd love to sit down with somebody who knows actually the history of all this and when things actually started and when they did this and that. But basically, what you started with in analog boards were a whole bunch of channels. So you didn't just want to be able to have one microphone and have that thing be amplified, but you wanted to take all of these inputs and mix them together. That's how I get the mixing board. You wanted to be able to mix those inputs together and then output a mix of these inputs.
Yep.
And so the basic form of that would have, where we started, you would have the microphone input, and then you would have a gain, an attenuation of sorts. You may have some control over the tone of it in one way or another, but then pretty quickly you're moving straight out to the faders, which were the actual control against, like, controlling how loud one source was compared to another. Inside of it, and then that mix from the faders would then be sent to the main out, and you would have that going to the speakers or amplifiers and speakers and all of that. So a whole bunch of different versions of that concept all came out. A bunch of people got really rich making different forms of that. And they got more complicated. You were able to not only just do, like the gain and the, basic, tone. You could also, like, you would have, a 3-band EQ, and you could do, the, treble, the mids and the lows on that. And then they came out with the sweepable mid, and then they came out with, you don't just want to output to the mains, you also want to stereo bus these, and you want to pull these across this, and you want to be able to pan, and you want to be able to mute, and you want to be able to, and you want to be able to insert, and you'd had the sends and returns then going into it to be able to send a signal into an effects processor of some kind, whether it was an actual, like what we think of as an effects processor, or the analog version of that came before, which was like a tape deck or a a spring, like an actual spring. Like there's a box, there's a spring that you're running the signal through to make like this warbly sound. Like these things were massive and heavy, and that's why not a lot of people had them.
Yep.
But then quickly they started to try to figure out a way to make this reproducible. Because even, your tape deck the tape that you would use would then affect the sound on how many times it had been used or how worn it was. And then people started to really like a certain tone, but then that tone would change in these mixing recordings. And so really it came down to, we want to be able to reproduce it exactly the way that we can imagine it in our heads. And so that's when you started to get digital effects. And digital effects kind of gives rise to this idea that I need to be able to manipulate the sound that's coming in, but in a reproducible way, in a not just reproducible, in a what's the word I'm looking for? You would affect the sound in a controlled,
reproducible way is what I would think of.
Yeah, I mean it's you knew what you were getting
Yep.
every single time, and you knew if you tweaked this, then it would sound a little more like this. And so everybody talks about wanting to go analog. This is what always cracks me up about especially electric guitarists now, because they're still the ones, more than any other instrumentalist that I know of, at least, that are holding on to their amps and saying that it sounds better coming from an amp. And I always just kind of laugh because half of them are using digital, or I don't know how to say it. They're not using tube amps. They're using
solid state
amps, which are reproducing a sound based on a digital algorithm, not based on an analog. So there's kind of a funniness about it, but guys that will hold to their tube amps and say that there's nothing better than that, like I get it. I hear what you're saying, until something changes with the tube amp and you're like, oh, that's not exactly the sound that I had before. It's worn out. Oh, I need a different power tube. I need a different, whatever tube. I need to replace this or that or whatever. And it's like, okay, so now you're starting to see, over time, these things change. If it's analog, it is going to change. Your guitar strings are going to need to be changed.
Yep.
And I get it. That interaction with something that is analog, it feels really good. It feels more manipulatable, and I love the idea of a musician listening so intently that they can hear the difference in the tone inside of that. And those are exactly the musicians that we need to get on board with a lot of digital stuff now, to be able to express the difference that they hear. Like, if you're listening that closely, I need your ear to tell everybody else what sounds different.
Yep.
Because we'll be able to, and if we can't figure out how to reproduce all this stuff digitally, then there's going to be a moment where we lose some of it because of that. But that's just kind of the nature of how all this goes.
Yep.
Most guys don't have an actual tape reverb or tape delay, on their board. They don't actually have a spring reverb on their board. They have a digital representation of that.
Yep.
And they love it. They think it's amazing. It's really funny to talk about these things back to back and not feel the weirdness of it. But all this manipulation then gives rise to the idea that what if we put all these tools into the mixer?
Yep.
What if I was able to manipulate more in the mixer than before? And you got the guy who, in recording studios is called the producer. it's funny to not you don't hear that in the live space. They're not called producers generally. They're called audio techs or audio engineers or something like that, or just the sound guy. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
But you got this guy who's actually taking all of the work that other people are doing and trying to create something out of it. There's I think it was a lot of different people who've said it, but the one that's coming to my head or popping into my head is there was a Steve Jobs movie with Michael Fassbender. And I know that this is just eating you up, Kris, but it doesn't have anything really to do with Steve Jobs.
Okay.
Other than it fits with his just really arrogant personality. But he's talking to Wozniak before one of the Apple events. And that this is a movie, so whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know if it actually happened or not, or happened like this, but Jobs is talking to Wozniak about what he does, like what his job is, because Wozniak's a genius.
Yeah.
And Steve doesn't actually do any of the,
he's not
coding.
He's not in the hardware.
Yeah, he's not doing any of the either the coding or the soldering.
Yep.
Figuring out how to make this, microchip, whatever. So Wozniak is actually asking Jobs what he actually does, and they happen to be in the orchestra pit of this place where they're going to have this release, and he Jobs is like, you sit here and you're like really good. You're the best in your row. It's fantastic. You are so good at what you do, but I stand here. And he stood in the conductor spot and I play all of it. And there's part of me that just is like, are you, yep. Okay. Yeah, no, you really, that's a thing. But there is some arrogance to being the sound guy sometimes.
Yeah.
And you look at where the digital mixers are now, and it's legit. I don't think I ever felt it as a sound guy, but I've watched some of these guys who actually know what they're doing, mixing things. And I'm like, they're no longer constrained by how it sounds at the source. That's the best way I can describe it. They are making music out of what is being given to them that is not necessarily dependent on what they're being given.
No, they're making it sound the way they want it to sound.
And that's what everybody wants to hear. And it's crazy. It seems like we should be getting to the place where you don't go to a this or that concert anymore. You go to this producer's concert. You go to this mixer's concert. And maybe that's all that DJs are just guys that got sick of having to try to make it sound good out of other people's stuff, and they like the music, which I don't, but that's fine. Like, it's not a whatever. So I look at these digital mixing consoles, and you no longer just have a gain, a 3-band EQ, 5-band EQ if you got crazy, whatever on the analog boards. I remember seeing some of them that were just massive lines of knobs that all had to do with their submixes and their EQ and the send and return and all of that. Like, it all lined up. And what they decided to do with digital boards is they decided, hey, if we can take the same footprint of an analog board, and instead of requiring all of that space for this line, if we put all that on a screen or maybe in one place that could be controllable, what we really need to do, though, is we need all of that processing to happen on a chip. and that chip is really going to be where the power of this board comes in, because then we can give the mixer the mix. I almost said mixologist. That's
Go with
that's a
it. It
bartender,
fits the
right?
show.
Fits the show. So the mixologist can look at more information at any given time, like he was on one of the big boards, the 128 channel
Yeah.
monsters that you got to walk from one end to the other.
Yeah.
And they can see all of that in a 12 to 24 fader sized console.
Yep. I'll fill the airtime. You were talking before about the mixologist creating the sound that he wants. I would love to see the conversation between the Edge and the guy running audio at the show, because I've seen what the Edge does with his own personal rig to create the sounds that he wants. And then to hear him talking to the audio engineer, whoever it is, and he's hearing it in the show. And I just imagine him having like a talkback mic and go, "Stop changing my sound."
Yeah, I think there has to be a real trust there, and a lot of these big bands that are really particular about the way that they sound, that really have a specific ear to it. They don't trust just anybody to mix them, because they're gonna mess it up, and there's too many things that can be messed up inside of that now, from these big boards that have all of this stuff. Like, you can add all kinds of reverbs and all kinds of compression, and all kinds of delays, and pitching and different tremolo. I mean, all of these digital effects can then be brought in on the board side. And so there's a respect for what the artist is, what the musician, the artist, the whatever, that they're trying to do from their end. And then there's the respect that has to be given the opposite direction of the guy who has to hear all of the things and make them sound the way that is pleasing. And they have to respect each other. They also have to be on the same page, or somebody's probably going to be disappointed with that.
Yeah.
I've been in both situations where I've seen a guy, or I've been the musician that was being mixed by somebody who did not know as much as me, and I have been the musician who was being mixed by someone who knew a lot more than me. I've been the mixer who knew a lot more than the musicians, and I've been the mixer who was being schooled by the musicians. I will never forget, those of you that know who Shane and Shane are, they're Texas boys, and Christian worship leaders and artists. And Shane Bernard is usually the one who's singing the lead and playing the guitar, and he'll I think most people know his face better, partially because Shane Everett also just kind of stands with his hat like tucked around his eyes, and he's singing like really high, but he's not playing an instrument. He's just hanging out until it's time for him to sing, and then he just destroys it. I mean, it's fantastic to listen to. But what I didn't know about him is he's got a fantastic ear. And when I was mixing Shane and Shane one time, Shane Everett walks out into the room while everybody's playing, like the band's playing, Shane Bernard is singing and everything, and he listens for a second, then he turns around to me and say, "Okay, I need you to bump Shane's voice at this frequency, by 6 decibels or something like that." I mean, it wasn't insignificant. Like, he was telling me what to do, and I was like, okay. So did the thing. I was like, oh gosh, that sounds a lot better. And like he walked me through a few tweaks that he wanted, and then he walked back and started singing his like himself. And I was like, that doesn't happen very often. Like I'm not a rock star sound engineer or anything like that, but where somebody just knows exactly where they need something to be, that's a pretty great ear. And it reminds you, I think, sometimes as a sound engineer that like there are other people that know what they're talking about, and they're professional musicians or they're professional mixers, and we all need to approach all of this with some humility.
Sure.
So, but all that to say, digital mixing console, one of the things, or some of the things that it brought in whenever they started doing digital mixing consoles, started becoming popular. One of them was just the size of a rig. Could be a lot smaller.
Absolutely.
Like I talked about, because you have pages, you press the button and what everybody wants to see is you press the page button and all the faders slide.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Everybody loves that.
It's magic.
That was magic. Like I agree. Like it was fantastic when that you have the motorized faders that would move to where they're supposed to be. That actually happened before the like what we now consider really digital mixers. Really high end analog mixers would have that ability because they would want presets for different things. You'd see it in studios where they would be able to press a button and the faders would move within a given time in order to be able to switch a sound, like to be able to have a different sound for a different part of a song. And so that wasn't as new as everybody said, but like widespread, it wasn't on most boards. And then what that allowed then is for us to put more inputs on a smaller footprint. Also, like I said, having the manipulatives of the signal chain. Wow, that was a thing. I did not rehearse that. But having all of the different knobs and all the different controls for each board being kind of for each input being kind of shared in one space made some of that real estate, got some of that back, and then they really needed at that point to have a some sort of large interface that they could see everything that was being manipulated in any given area. And so and to really help you navigate what you were doing. Mm-hmm. Man, that was one of the hardest things for me to learn going from analog to digital. Is so many times on an analog board you would just you would know which channel you were working on, and then you would reach up and grab that fader and you would listen and then move the knob in whichever direction you needed to, and then you could kind of feel on the board where to be next without looking at the board. And with digital, it became very much okay, I need you to stop and I need you to look down and I need you to press the button for the channel that you want to manipulate, and then start changing stuff. Because if you do that without looking, you're going to end up changing a lot of settings on a channel that you didn't mean to, and then you're going to have no idea what you messed with.
Yeah, you're going to end up.
It got really tricky there at the beginning.
You don't want to end up in invalid memory.
Yeah, who wants? I mean, right? Oh my gosh, IT crowd.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Yeah. Talk about the big thing for me is going away from an analog snake to the digital snake, and how that really changed things. So,
for those of you that weren't here for it, there used to be a day where you had to wind a stage snake like and there's probably not a lot of people who are going to know what pool like vacuum hose feels like, but these massive things of copper that would be, half-inch or bigger in diameter, and just a lot of copper packed into a single run. And on one end, if it was attached, you'd have a big box that would have the inputs and outputs all in the same box, and you would run that up to the stage, and you would plug everything into that, and then you'd have to run the other end, usually underneath chairs, because that's how we do things. Way to get something kicked and be in trouble. But like all the way to the mixer, and the mixer has to be in a good spot in the room, because you really don't want the mixer to have to stand in the room and then run over to try to change something and then come back. He needs to be able to hear what he needs to change from his mixing position. It became such an important thing. And so you'd have these big long snakes that would be huge and have to travel in their own trunk. And then you got the big ones that had the pins on them that would give you an anxiety attack just trying to plug in, because if you bend one of those pins, you are in trouble. And it would like slide that sucker in and then spin the collar on it to make sure that it stayed put. And if you were really fancy, that may be going into a split snake where you had the sins from the inputs from the stage going to that, and then it would break out, and you would have one set going to the monitors and one set going to the front of house. And man, it was such, like, you had to be some kind of strong. Like, I'm not saying you got to be most of us. I'm not going to say most of us. I don't know that. But there's quite a few of us in the sound mixing world that are not slim, trim, and whatever, but you still had to be able to lift some weight, because that's all those cables was weight. And I remember the first day that somebody handed me a network cable and said, it was a big wad of network cable. Like, that thing was a roll, and it was, 250 feet maybe. And they were like, plug this in over there and plug the other end into this. And I was like, what? So there's a box on stage. There's a computer on stage I'm going to plug this into, and then I'm going to plug this into the back of the mixer, and that's the only cable I need. That's what you're telling me right now. What about the outputs? Everything's on a network cable. I was like, guys, you don't need to tell me anything else. At this point, I would like to go full digital. All it takes is once. I mean, you would think about it like we had to, like, not only were those other cables so heavy and so cumbersome and so hard to work with, and so they were so expensive. And if you mess something up, you messed it up. And you had to buy a new one.
And you could lose a channel in the copper run, and that was it. Depending on where the break was at, well, we're not using that channel anymore. You can
drill into that thing and do surgery and take it apart. So there was a lot of improvements that were very easy to see. I think on the surface. And the last improvement that I would say, kind of along these lines, is that all of a sudden you could get a lot of functionality at not a lot of money. And this is where, when it first came out, or when the first ones came out, I think all of them were still prohibitive digital mixers. But a little company that was not taken very seriously, little company that wasn't taken very seriously by a lot of the audio world at the time, called Behringer, came out with a box or a mixer that they called the X32. And the X32 had a few wrinkles in what was formerly pretty dismissible, being Behringer. I don't know if they had already been, Music Tribe had already purchased Behringer and Midas. I think so when the X32 came out. But it was still very much a Behringer experience, but there was something different about it. It was like, oh, this seems to be holding up better. This seems to work more regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there's a bunch of people that disagree about Music Tribe and stuff like that. But here's what I would say. All of a sudden, for $3,000, I could get a digital mixer that had a lot of functionality. And that opened up a lot of people to being able to move from analog into digital.
Yep, it's disruptive.
It was disruptive. And I really do think that board was disruptive. It's not like there weren't other mixers that were trying to be everything that it was trying to be. I'm not saying that there weren't a lot of boards that did parts of it better. But all of a sudden you have Midas designed preamps on a Behringer board. You have all of the pluses of a digital console with only a few of the little quirks that you were like, how is that supposed to? Oh, okay. And by the like second firmware update, third firmware update, something like that, it was very usable.
Yep.
Now you're always going to have like the Digicos and the Soundcraft.
Yep. Allen and Heath.
Solid State Logic. These guys that are going to kind of, Allen and Heath, that are going to kind of own certain areas. Midas, I remember, used to be considered that. I think that something happened whenever Midas and Behringer became Music Tribe, that I don't know if it was all customer service or if it was just how it was difficult to find answers to some questions, but some people really like latched onto it and grew with what they were doing. And so some of the things made sense. And some people didn't. And so I would say that there for a while, I would much rather have mixed on an X32 than a lot of the budget stuff that like Allen and Heath came out with. Now it seems like it's flipped pretty hard. Not flipped pretty hard, but it seems like everybody wants to be Allen and Heath. If you're in that mid-tier, I don't hear a lot of people screaming to get the Midas Heritage HD, whatever it is. I thought it was a pretty good looking board, to be honest with you. But I didn't actually like the way that the Midas Pros looked. So that's kind of a funny thing about all that. But then quietly again, Behringer came out with the Wing,
yep,
which we'll talk about here in a minute. Like that, again, that kind of changed things for a lot of us. And I think we were able to do some things that we weren't expecting to be able to do, even with some of these high-end consoles. Now, when you get into higher-end consoles, then you are getting into like these frame rates and frame rates. Is that the right? Refresh rates. Right? Anyway. I'm not using the right words. I'm getting everything muddled up in my head. Where the you get higher digital fidelity, the more the faster the speed is with these things, and so you have to respect that. You have to learn how to read in between the lines, because once we went from Class A amplification to D and all these others, what you're hearing in a sound wave is no longer a curve. It's more a really small stair step up and down.
Yep.
And you don't really realize that that's what you're hearing when you're hearing it, because it's hard to notice the difference. But the smaller that, the finer that stair step gets, the more indiscernible it is.
Correct.
And so you got all these boards then pushing the boundaries of what is possible. And, one day we'll look at 48 kilohertz or whatever as barbaric. Like, why did we ever think that was okay? But right now it's hard for a lot of people to tell the difference.
Yep.
And then you got people who are like, well, if you're not mixing at 96, then what are you even doing? And it's, there's always going to be stuff like that. But just the ability that digital boards brought for lower budget venues and lower budget artists to be able to step in to these spaces and be able to really keep up with a lot of things that were happening was, I think that's a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
What made the wing so important to us, or on our end, or me, I guess on my end, was I have a lot of, I have to have a lot of flexibility, or had to have a lot of flexibility. And when you have to be really flexible, one of the things that you don't want to have to do is reconfigure the entire board based on, where somebody's standing on a given Sunday.
True.
Or day, whatever it is. Weekend. We'll call it a weekend. On any given weekend. But what the wing did was, one of the things that the wing did was it made sure that you can be separated. You can separate your source from your channel. So there's certain things that the sources carry with them. Biggest one of those is gain. And everybody who's plugged into a different, input and then had to realize, I have to change the gain structure here again, like that, or I've lost where that input is, and what is, I think it was in 18, but now it's in 5. Like what what was that again? And you can name things based on where the source is or what the source is, and then you can do your gain structure, and you can do mute groups inside of the source and not just at the channel level. Like you can do different routing, from that. The tap point being at the source is really handy to make sure that you've got the unmanipulated sound that you're starting with on some of these things. And all of that means that you have to, it made sense, I guess, in my mind, and maybe for some people it didn't, but it made sense in my mind to make sure that the source is what's carrying that, and the channel can be independent of that.
Yeah.
Like we're going to make sure that this channel is used for this thing. And if I move him over here, he just goes into that. Whoa. I don't know how I did that.
What'd you do?
But something tells me it had something to do with the way that I was doing my fingers.
Balloons.
Y'all can't see that, but there were balloons all of a sudden on my screen. I didn't do any. I don't know what I did.
I don't know. I can't do it.
I don't know. I lost mine.
I'm jealous.
But anyway, there's a lot of different things about this. I feel like I babbled a lot and didn't really say that much. Jason's probably shaking his head or screaming at the podcast by now that I'm not talking about something or that I said something stupid.
Well, see, that's the beauty of it. He'll just have to send a boost.
That's right.
He can pay us to correct us.
Speaking of boosts and Jason.
Yes, we can transition to that as we're getting towards the end of the show. So this first boost actually came in for episode, let me confirm. Yeah, episode 28, the AI edition. And he sent us, let's see, how many sats? Because I hate that they break this apart the way they do. So he sent 333 sats. Okay. We got to keep 313 once it made it through all the channels.
313.
Yeah, with the comment, it would have been more, but there was way too many oh wows in the AI episode. I too have laughed at VR face after coming out from under the hood.
Yeah.
So that was in reference to you talking about your boys kind of having a little fun with you at your expense when you took yours off.
Man.
So, and then he hit us again for episode, where'd it go? Episode 29, Altered Reality with Beer Donations. Who's coming up with these names?
That's you, man.
Yeah, he sent us 1,234. And whoa. Yeah, that's a big boost. That's a baller boost. And he says, 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's the pin on my Jump Cloud password vault. I mean, oops, ignore that. Just for posterity, did my 333 come through from March 11th?
Yes, it did, Jason. I'm sorry we didn't mention it before.
Well, what
but 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Oh, remind me to change the combination on my luggage.
Yeah. What's the code? How did they say that in Spaceballs?
Yeah,
the code to the
that's the kind of code that
to the dome
an idiot would have on his, or a moron would have on his luggage.
Yeah, what kind of an idiot would use that for their code?
1, 2, 3, 4. That's the code to my luggage.
Remind me to change the code on my luggage when we get back. Yes. And then shortly after that is when Spaceballs shifted into the maid.
Yeah.
And you get the
very important
iconic line, suck. Oh, thank you, Mel Brooks. Thank you.
All the movies that would not exist if he was born today.
Don't get me started on Blazing Saddles.
Oh, man.
There's no way you're pulling that off now. I don't care if it is him doing it again. I mean, the people that you would have to even attempt to get buy-in from to do that movie now, I mean, the kind of one of the nicer ones is, oh, boys, look what I got here. Where the white women at?
Where the white women at?
And it just goes way off from there.
I mean, I think we still could get away with the classic. Lori's dad's favorite scene for Blazing Saddles is still the campfire scene where they're all eating beans.
Yes.
That's probably still fine.
Yeah.
But not much else.
Yeah. Yep.
Solid as a rock. Yeah, but that's my shooting hand.
Yeah. You got the shaky shake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, glad we get to talk, man.
Yeah, it was good. Connection stayed once I moved the radio.
Yeah, into your fancy dorm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is one of 3 houses that are on this property. Okay. I think in summer, this is going to be the men's director. I think this is the men's director and his wife. Next over will be the women's director and her husband. And then way over yonder is a gigantic house that could hold probably 3 families. That's where the director will probably be.
With his 3 families?
Well, no, we're not going old school, Old Testament here, but I'm just saying there's enough between the upstairs and the downstairs. Oh yeah, you could put multiple families easy.
Y'all keep making it happen.
Yep. There's a lot going on here. So, well, I enjoyed it. Definitely different without a beer.
Yep.
Dr. Pepper's great, but it's not beer.
Nope.
So
we'll be back at it next time.
Absolutely. Yes. I think next time I either want to try to get us a growler of Sanctimonium from Truvine, or I'd like to get a growler of the one at BJ's. They've got I think the one you had at that time, it was the bourbon barrel aged. I haven't had that one yet.
Yeah, no, it's really good.
So
I liked it. I don't know.
Yep.
I mean,
speaking of, did you get your studio moved?
Not quite yet. We got most of it moved. We could have recorded there if you were here, but we've still got quite a few things that need to move over because holy cow, when you start tearing that stuff apart, you're like, oh, we've been here for a while.
Yep.
But we're mostly moved into our house.
Okay.
And the good news is we won't have to use the internet too much over there because right now it's terrible. I need your help. Anyway,
so your little solution's not working?
It's fine. It's just not. It's no 500 up, 500 down, Kris.
No, it's not.
So,
well, we can still look to see if it's possible to make a bridge between there.
Yep. So maybe we'll be able to talk about that one of these days.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, have a good rest of your trip.
Yep. Thank you, man.
Get back here safe.
Absolutely.
I'll talk to you later.
Yep, see you.
Bye.
Great show, boys.
10 out of 10, perfection.